You know, Spite, people say they love sport bikes.
They do say that.
They say that a lot. We see in the comments all the time. Yamaha R6 or die from some 14-year-old kid who's never ridden a bike before. A lot of people love simping about sport bikes, but you look at the sales figures and nobody's buying sport bikes.
Nobody's buying sport bikes. Nobody cares.
It's really weird. So we thought we'd make today's video looking at, well, people say they love sport bikes, but they don't buy them. Do you think it's some sort of like lofty kind of dream-like goal that they have and that's why they do that, you know?
Probably one of those things where it's just, that's their idea of a motorcycle, you know?
Yeah, and then idea meets reality, and it's usually not quite as good. So today, we're gonna talk a little bit about why people say they love sport bikes, why people aren't buying sport bikes as much, and what kind of is going on in the sport bike market. But behind us, we have two sport bikes that we both love very much.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Both of these bikes are pretty sweet.
I know you are absolutely head over heels over that Triumph right there.
Yes, this Speed Triple 1200RR I love, and I would definitely buy for myself if I was a crazy person, did already own 5 motorcycles. But both of these bikes over here, this Cowie Z900RS and this Triumph Speed Triple RR, are actually giveaway motorcycles we have over on yamanoob.co. But if you go over to shop.yamanoob.co, you can find a ton of selection of helmets, jackets, boots, gloves, all kinds of great stuff we have on there. And for every $1 you spend will be an entry to win either this bike or that bike. So go and check out the link below to shop.yamanoob.co, get some of our amazing gear, and get entered to win these motorcycles. Without further ado, let's jump in. All right, Spite, people love sport bikes, not buying them. Give me your thesis on why that is.
So I think it's a lot like my situation with Harley, where I grew up in the Midwest. I saw a lot of Harleys. That became my vision of what a motorcycle was. And then I started on a Harley, and now I have that like just pull in my soul.
You're wearing a Harley shirt right now.
Yes, not on purpose. For another video, you'll see it. But anyway, I think a lot of people look at a sport bike, and that's the first bike that they saw when they were a kid. And they were like, oh man, I saw this dude doing a wheelie down the highway, or, you know, I went to a Moto America race as a kid, or, you know, some of my buddies did track days, blah, blah, blah. It was their first experience on a motorcycle. And so they look at it and they're like, that's what motorcycling is.
Yeah.
And they're super enamored with it, and then they ride one.
Yeah.
And they probably don't go ride it at a dealership first. They ride one of their buddies, and they're like, oh man, this thing's not exactly what I thought it was.
Yeah. You also get the flip side though of guys who they only know like a super sport life, and they think that that's like normal, and they're like, yeah, no, that's like the bike I want. But those guys only buy like used 2005 to 2015 Japanese 600s. Like, they don't really buy new bikes. So we're talking new bike sales today, and those are obviously down, bikes getting discontinued and those sort of things. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, I mean, my first sport bike memory, I was in the backseat of my car, and I'm pretty sure it was a yellow S-Rad Gixxer in the early 2000s. He was on the highway next to us, and he just lifted up a wheelie, and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I literally was playing my Game Boy, and I was like, whoa. And I never forgot it. I never forgot that moment. And I also had another moment later where I was in my little Mazda 3 that I had as a high schooler, and some motorcycle pulled it up a stoplight, and I just saw him just take off, and I was like, that is the fastest thing I've ever seen in my life. I was like, that is amazing. So I've always had the sport bike itch. I've never been, you know, Harley aficionado, or never was introduced to those bikes as a young kid. But yeah, it's crazy how nowadays, I mean, with electrification coming and the sport bike thing dying, like, they're very much a dying breed.
Yeah, and we can actually see that with racing statistics, because people are just not watching racing. And I have a lot of theories as to why, and I'm sure you do too, being, you know, MotoGP is not, it's not competitive enough, it's not, you can't pass.
No, the Rossi effect. I mean, that's a big one, right? He's not racing anymore. A lot of people are like, no Rossi, no party. They're all like annoyed. It's like, come on.
But, you know, I think a lot of people have finally realized that super sport motorcycles are literally only designed to be at a racetrack.
Correct.
You know, I know you came to that realization after you took one of your Daytonas out on track, and you were like, yeah, this thing is just a weapon for going around a racetrack.
Yeah, I remember I got it on the street a couple days later, and I was like, what am I even doing? I was like, what is the point?
it was the same thing for me with the R7, not even like full super sport. And then I rode the ZX6 and I was like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
You know, when you can actually use a super sport for its intended purpose, they're magical.
Yeah.
Absolutely magic. But then you use it on the street and you're like, this sucks. Feels like an outlap.
It's funny you mentioned the racing thing because I feel like, 20 years ago, that was such a big thing, especially AMA and MotoGP. It was race on Sunday, sell on Monday, right? And that adage held true for a long time. That's why sport bikes had their heydays in the early 2000s. But man, things just don't work like that anymore. People are buying motorcycles and they're coming to motorcycling from all kinds of different places now, right? The media consumption is so different. You're not just watching racing and then going out to your dealership and being like, that's the bike that won. I want that one. Now it's like, I saw Itchy Boots riding a CRF 300. I want a CRF 300. Like it's so different now to see what bikes people are gonna buy based on what. And to your point, a lot of people, they don't want to be in that hunched over position. They want a bike they can do a lot with. And as you kind of like morph a motorcycle to that palette, it becomes an ADV or a sport touring bike, basically.
Yeah. They start looking like this, and then they get bigger and bigger, and then they grow into an R1250 GS.
The cylinders go down, and then all of a sudden you have a road glide, and you're like, no, go back, go back.
Let me ask you this, because I think part of this is the case, and I'm not entirely, I'd like to get your feeling on it. Tech on these bikes. Do you think that there's just way too much tech for the average person to have, feeling almost detached? Yeah, they don't feel like they're actually controlling the motorcycle. We talked about that thin veneer between us and the R1 when we had it. And then we rode the Ducati, and it was just like, if you didn't do this right, you were doing that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do you think that these bikes have just too much going on and it's turning people off?
I think it's a double-edged sword because, to compete, you have to make the bikes make more horsepower.
Yes.
To make them rideable, you need to put technology on them. Like a motorcycle without tech, it's up to about 150, 160 horsepower that it starts becoming unusable, where you need to be a seriously skilled pilot to be able to use a non-TC, non-ABS, non-rider mode bike with like 200 horsepower. That's like, okay, like you're Ben Spies or you're, Valentino Rossi, whatever it may be. So in order for them to be usable, you need the tech. So the arc of advancements happen to where if you don't have the tech, the bike's not rideable. So it's, it's kind of like chicken or the egg in that case. But yeah, I feel like you've definitely taken something away from the riding experience by making them so kind of polished and smooth and refined and electronically capable. Yeah.
And then with all that tech comes the higher price tag. We've seen the sort of base model leader bike is now like 15, 16, 17 grand, with the flagship being close to like 30 G's. Yeah,
like a Fireblade is 28, R1M is 27.
You got your Ducatis.
V4S, starts at go talk to your mortgage lender. I just think, people are starting to realize that those bikes just aren't as fun. But then you see stuff like the hyper naked category where it's like, okay, we're still going to give you basically last generation's leader bike power, but with all the tech and the upright seating position. So those are selling pretty well as far as I understand. MT09SP, MT10s, V4Ss, Street Fighters. Where do you see like, race bike versus naked bike thing?
Man, it's tough. It's one of those things where even I look at a Super Duke and I'm like, I could get with one of those for sure. And then you ride it and you're like, God damn, that is just so much bike. And I think it's probably because we have so much experience with so many different styles of bikes. Yeah. Because they're constantly coming and going. We're certainly not A-tier riders or anything. We just make goofy videos on the internet. Yeah. But we still have a lot of seat time. And I've come to the realization that beyond like 120 horsepower, it's all wasted,
Pretty much, yeah.
Ideally, I'd probably just have a, maybe like a bored out MT-07 or something. Now, like the MT-09 even is so much.
Like 20660.
I mean, there we go. It's
Yeah.
another one where we come back to
Yeah.
the Tuono, and those things are flying off the shelves.
They are. Yeah. I was talking to my contact over at Eurocycles, Chris, and he says that once a Tuono shows up, it is gone in 24 hours. Yeah, which is great for Aprilia and great for those sales, but I just think that people, what's funny is you've seen this also in the non-homologated race bike and the homologated race bike thing that Ducati does, for example. Because like Ducati will sell you an 1100cc V4S that you can go and dick around with on track. You technically can't go race one because it's outside of the classes, but they don't care because nobody's buying them to go race them. They're buying them to go flex at Coda for a weekend,
Yeah.
So that's where stuff like the R7, even though it's competitive in Twins Cup, that's the only category it can really competitively race. It's its own little Twins Cup class. And, once you start getting outside those homologated rules, you start making more interesting bikes that appeal to a broader variety of people. If you only make 600s and 1000s, it's kind of narrow, It's just kind of narrow.
And I think one of the weird things that we've seen with super sports, and it's nice that we have the Speed Triple here, is we're seeing this thing where naked bikes were based on sport bikes, but now naked bikes have become so separate that we have sport bikes based on naked bikes.
Yeah.
Which is literally the Ouroboros eating its tail here. And we've mentioned it a couple of times, but it feels to me like that's the sport bike that people want. They just need to figure out how to make it less insane. Because that bike is still wild.
Yeah, and honestly, I took this out on track. I never touched the pegs on it. I rode the crap out of it. It was comfortable. I loved it. I loved it. I never felt like I was like, man, I wish I was on an R1. No, I don't care at all. I was like, this is so fun. This is so rewarding to ride. Bikes like the RS660 are like that too. You're like, this is so much fun. So, when you build bikes that are outside of that traditional super high revving inline four thing, they tend to be more fun, like you ride an R6 around town. If you, and I don't mean to dog on you guys, but if you don't have a wide palette of riding styles and have ridden a lot of motorcycles, you'll ride an R6 and thinks it's a ton of fun around the city. But, an MT-07 is a lot more fun to ride.
Yes.
A lot more fun to ride. An RS660 is a lot more fun to ride. An MT-09, a lot more fun to ride. So you build bikes around fun, I think you sell more of them.
Yeah. And you see less and less of the inline fours.
But there's still something about the fully fared motorcycle that captures the imagination. You see a Ducati V4S Panigale, and you're like, damn, that thing looks cool.
Yeah.
Something about the face of it and the fairings of it. Do you think you lose some of that with the naked bike?
It's a different style, for sure. For sure it's a different style. Naked bikes can often look incomplete, I find. We had the V4S in here, and both Derek and Whitney looked at it and they thought it was ugly.
And we almost lit them on fire.
Yeah, because it's gorgeous.
It's a great looking motorcycle.
It's got the wings, it's got the
The angry little face and the, yeah.
But I can see how naked bikes are more divisive than the fully fared bike, because the fully fared bike is just, you say the word sport bike and you immediately think like whatever the R1 looks like, whatever the R6 looks like.
Yeah.
Because that style has been so tested and so rigorously used for decades.
Yeah. It's such an ingrained look, high tail, stubby front end, really sharp little rake on it. Like, it looks correct as a sport bike.
Yeah.
But most people ride a naked bike and they are just as capable nowadays. That's the thing. It used to be that, you bought an FC6, it's like, all right, you're giving up a lot over the R6, right? But nowadays, like, an MT-09 SP is a weapon of a bike, a Duke 890, a Street Triple. They're all really good and super track capable. KTM's always got that one guy elbow down on the Duke, and he's like really stretching it because his handlebars are really up high. They probably found a guy with some really long arms.
Yeah, it's a weird situation we find the sport bike world in.
Yeah.
And it's I wouldn't argue that it's not just sport bikes that are seeing this kind of
transformation, maybe?
Yeah, this sort of existential crisis, shall we say.
Yeah.
Like big cruisers. People are walking away from the big cruisers too.
Man, I think that's down to just money. Yeah. Like, those bikes are insane. Like, we just did the top 7 Harleys you should buy video. I wrote that up, and I read that up actually the other day. And one of those bikes is like $30,000. And you're like, who can really afford that? You know what I mean? Like, who's gonna actually go and be like, you know what? Let me go spend $30,000 on a motorcycle. Like, no.
But you can say the exact same thing for the sport bikes. It's like, oh, I could get a $20,000 bike, or I could go on Craigslist, get the pre-2009 era R1, which is the classic inline four sound, and it'll be like $5 grand.
Yeah. And
just as fast in most people's hands.
Basically, yeah, just as fast. But I think at the end of the day, motorcycles they're emotional purchases.
Yeah.
You get them because they make you look good and feel good and you want them. And that's what I think people still get out of the fully fared bikes. And I've actually seen it on our Discord server where people, they want a little naked bike or something and they're like, no, but I want the fully fared option, especially with like the CB 650 line.
Yes.
They're like, no, I want the CBR 650 because it's like got the plastics and everything. And we look at that and we're like, that's just more to take off when you have to maintain it. That's so annoying. Like, oh man. And the CB 650 looks so great. But yeah, like some people would see a naked bike and not really gel with it or understand it, Like I remember when I first got into motorcycles, like I remember I wanted an R3 because it looked like a real sport bike. I thought about an MT-07 and I was like, that doesn't look quite right. I got the little bike, Do
you think that there's a ticking clock on sport bikes? Getting kind of the last nuts and bolts, or can we justify a clickbaity thumbnail? Is your time with sport bikes running out?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, it is. I don't know what that looks like. I feel like it'll be highly consolidated. Like you're already seeing bikes getting chopped left and right, emissions laws, those sort of things. I think it'll be super consolidated. I feel like in 15 years, if you want a super sport, you're gonna have to go to Ducati or Aprilia. I don't think anyone else is really gonna make one. I genuinely, it sounds sacrilegious to say, but I could see Yamaha just being like, you know what, we're not gonna make the R1 anymore. That would be insane. I would cry. I would honestly cry. I'd be like, dude, what? Like, this is it. It's the end of an era. That'd be the end of an era, I'd be like, holy like, we're going down the toilet, boys. Like, have one last hurrah and try to ride it out. But that would just be crazy. I mean, I could see Suzuki doing it first.
Suzuki's gonna fold first.
Honestly, because they're not in World Superbike. They're not in MotoGP. They have very small presence in even Moto America. Most people run the R1s and this kind of thing. I could see them be like, you know what? No more Gixxers.
Bet it starts with the 750, then it goes up to the 1000, then it comes down to the 600.
You think the 600s last to fall?
I think 600s last to fall.
I think the 1000s last to fall because people like the big bikes. I think they'll chop the 600 first, and then 750, then the 1000. I know, dude.
That would be, that's a reckoning day for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but we could see it happening. But folks, what do you think about sport bikes going the way of the dodo? Do you think that people overinflate their own love of sport bikes? Do you feel like people talk a lot about them and then obviously don't back it up with sales? Is everyone just becoming a freaking boring ADV dad? What is going on? It sucks. So let us know in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Remember, these two bikes behind us, we still love sport bikes. We're giving them away. Shop.yamini.co will get you entered to win these bikes. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.